The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
T. Higgins in stripes? Well, the Bengals, they plan on franchise tagging T. Higgins.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast.
James, today we talk about news that you broke, that T. Higgins is expected to be franchise tagged. You have some more information around that, some context that we can share. And let's start with the very simple part of this, which is that T. Higgins, now with the second straight franchise tag for $26 million and some change, is set to be a Bengal if the Bengals choose for T to be a Bengal in 2025. That's pretty much it. They use a franchise tag. That's how the franchise tag works. And now we'll see whether it's an extension, whether there's a potential trade to be explored in the future. But the first step, and I feel like we've talked about this in the last week, but for anyone who hasn't seen the shows, was franchise tagging T.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, and thank you. Getting this report and getting the information, I'm not sure it shocks any of our listeners, our regulars, our everydayers. By the way, shout out to the everydayers. It may shock some other fan bases across the league that may be watching right now on YouTube. This was pretty much expected in Cincinnati, and it's because of a few factors. And we can break those down. I mean, from the fact that Joe Burrow calls T. Higgins a need in December, after on December 8th, I think it was the 8th, December 8th or 9th, after that Monday Night Football game against Dallas, praising T, saying he wants T back long-term, saying there's a plan in place. That's where all of this started and all of this momentum. And I think that started behind the scenes. But that is where it's like, all right, well, the path to T coming back long term, it begins there, at least publicly. And I think the T being tagged at some point and the possibility of that is a big factor here. Because if I would have told you 6 months ago that they're going to tag T again, I think a lot of people would say, oh, well, this is because of a tag and trade. And that's the path that they're going to go down. I'm not sure. In fact, it's more than not sure. That is not the case, at least as of now. And I think the hope is a long-term deal. And we can get into all of that. But a second straight tag for T. Higgins, he'll make $26.18 million is the projection this year. If he doesn't get a long-term deal done, if they don't get a long-term deal done with him. And it's a step that at least keeps him away from the open market, where he would certainly get $30+ million per year. Clearly the top free agent wide receiver, clearly would have sent some shockwaves through the NFL if he signed elsewhere. He's not going to sign elsewhere because he's not going to hit the market.
Some shockwaves sent anyway today with the Bengals, well, with the report that you have here that we get for once from a local media member. So I'm just going to reiterate that for you, James, and pat your back a little bit here, because honestly, we often get the question, like, why is it never local media? Why is it always Ian Rappaport? Why is it always Schefter or whoever that breaks these stories? And so it's nice that we get one locally. But we have been telling you, people that have been listening to this show, that letting T. Higgins get to the market would be malpractice by the Bengals from an asset management perspective, even if their plan wasn't to keep him around. You just tag and trade him. That should have always been perceived as a worst case plan. So unfortunately for fans of other teams, probably Patriots fans, I think, judging from the reactions that I saw on social media immediately after this story went out, it was never really a thing that T was just going to get to free agency and get to the open bidder. It would be severe malpractice in the first place. And then the responses to that were, well, this is the Bengals. We're talking, like, come on, guys. They know when they have an asset. They're very stubborn about assets when they think they have assets, and getting rewarded for having those assets. And you could point to Jesse Bates certainly and the fractured relationship there. But the big difference here is one, a positional value thing to some degree, but two, it's David Mulligetta is not in the picture right now. And as you talked about with the agent change, that is a massive part of why this path for T. Higgins on the franchise tag this time around is so different from last year.
That's a big factor for sure. And I think the vibes feel much differently, which we could talk about. But before we do that, I think you mentioned the other teams. I don't think T. Higgins was nearly held in as high regard as he is now. It last year. And it's because you're looking at T. Higgins, maybe Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin coming off of a torn ACL, and who? It's just much different. The market feels different. The draft isn't as awesome. You don't have Malik Neighbors plus Marvin Harrison Jr. plus a Brian Thomas falling to the 20s in the first round, Lad McConkey. Like, think about all the guys, and I know I missed a couple there, but that were in the top of the draft that you were like, oh, these guys are definitely going to be good. And you combine that with what we have in free agency this year, the draft not being as good. And I just think T showed people something this year. I know a lot of Bengals fans look at it and say, oh, well, 12 games. He's played 12 games in each of the past 2 years. Agreed. Missed 5 games in each of the past 2 seasons, 10 total. And it's like, all right, well, is he injury prone? Like, what's going on? Well, yeah, he's dealt with some soft tissue injuries. He also had a career high 10 touchdowns. I feel like every single one of his catches went for a first down. It wasn't true. Not all of them went for first downs, to be clear. But he was catching stuff over the middle. He was really strong after contact, I felt like this year. Like, I still think his best football is probably ahead of him. And so I do think his value just across the league feels different. Part of that is the market and what's available. And I think part of that is T and what he showed this season. He leveled up a bit. And I do think that his best football is ahead of him. And the Bengals see that too, certainly. They see the market. They see everything around it. And this asset in T. Higgins, and I don't think they ever, once they really let the dust settle and looked at everything, I don't think they had any intent of letting him hit the open market.
Yeah, you talk about the way he leveled up this year. We were talking about that going back to training camp when I was in town last year and got to see T. Higgins in person in training camp for the first time last year before we got to see him in any games. It was obvious that, to me, his athleticism took another step last year. His movement ability, he was just moving better in camp. And I think his ability to separate on the routes where the Bengals ask him to separate, which largely slants and breakers from T. Higgins, comebacks, sure, certainly as well, part of his game. But that was all, I think, better. And I think maybe even more impactfully or more noticeably, he was running hard after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a big aspect in terms of talking about, the amount of catches he had that went for first downs. He's a big player for wide receiver. He's got size on a lot of corners that he faces week in, week out. And so putting that size to use and running through some guys was pretty fun to watch with T. Higgins this year, part of that leveling up. Let's talk about T's perspective, as he assuredly knows this. If you know this or you're able to publish it, how do you think T is feeling today? Do you think that there was good communication done? Do you think that, think back to last year and how he felt after being franchise tagged the first time? How do you think T's feeling about this?
I think he knew not only that it was possible, but in a large part likely that this could happen. And it still doesn't necessarily need to happen. I guess that's an important part here too. They could find common ground on a long-term deal. The guarantee is that they're guarantee. See what I did there? That T will not get to the market. They're not going to let him get to the market. They'll tag him before that March 4th deadline. The tag window opens up, full disclosure, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's February 18th, and is open for 2 weeks, March 4th at 4 p.m. And so by that 4 p.m. deadline on March 4th, and it could come much sooner than that, it's kind of up to the Bengals. And that's where the negotiating part of this comes in. If I'm T, and I do think T wants to be in Cincinnati, this is part of why you changed agents, is you didn't want it to be as ugly. And I think what David Mulligetta would do, on a second straight tag would say, all right, let's get you out of there and let's go get you a deal. And that would mean a trade demand. I don't anticipate that happening here. I think that Rocky Arsenault in Alliance Sports, their plan is to get T a long-term deal in Cincinnati. And where those talks are, I do not know, full disclosure. But knowing that you're going to get tagged now, knowing that that's the plan, I think that does set the stage to get something done long-term. And I really, maybe I'm crazy here. I don't think it should take that long. I think we kind of know what the T Higgins market is. And that's why you're seeing those reports that he could hit that $30 million per year mark. I think he would have if he were to get to free agency. Is he going to be mad if the Bengals offer him $27 million per? Like, I wonder that. I wonder what he's looking for. I wonder what the Bengals are comfortable with. But I do think that both sides are hoping to get to a long-term deal, which is the biggest difference between last year and this year, Jake.
Yeah,
I mean, last year, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's worth underlining, that is the key difference. But there are a number of other points that I wanted to get to in what you just said. So if you wanted to complete that thought before I jump in, go for it.
Yeah, the biggest difference is he was tagged last year, and I don't think there was really any motivation on either side. As weird as it sounds, like, of course, T wanted a long-term deal. I'm not sure there were talks, period, to be quite honest with you. I would not be shocked at all if there were zero talks from a long-term extension standpoint. The plan here is the opposite. I think both sides want to get something done. That's the desire. We'll see. Still needs to come together. But I think the intention feels much, much differently than it did a year ago.
Oh, 100%. The plan has been for a while now to try to get a long-term extension done with T Higgins. Now, there's so many angles here, I think, to still uncover, one of which is what the franchise tag does to the Bengals from a cap perspective. I want to make sure we get to that as well. And it's something that we'll cover again when and if the Bengals officially apply the franchise tag to T Higgins this year, because it does carry a cap burden for 2025 until something is resolved, whether that's an extension or a trade. But in terms of timing, say that there's an understanding between the Bengals and T Higgins that there's a mutual desire to get a long-term extension done, which I believe there is.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned last year that wasn't the case. The Bengals last year put the tag on T because they kind of threw their hands up and said, you know what, we're not even going to, we're too far apart. Here's a tag. We don't have to worry about it anymore. You know what's going on. And the timing will be interesting this year. We might see it early again. We'll see when the tag or when and if, I guess, in case they get an extension done first. But why I don't think an extension will get done first is that the agent and the player are so incentivized to at least put up the appearance of a fight.
Yeah.
Even if it's not directly a fight. If you are an agent or an agency, which is certainly involved in this negotiation, right? Rocky Arsenault, the agency. You don't want to be seen as representing the number one free agent in the NFL, according to various rankings this offseason, and accepting a deal below market value, open market value. And he's out there floating to journalists that $30 million is coming from him, right? Like, that's coming from the agency. It's not coming from teams necessarily. So he's trying to set the market value, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we see agents do often by talking to media sources. Oh yeah, he could. We're expecting, somewhere around 30 million. And then you're going to take a 27, maybe 26. I don't know what the number, maybe it's even 28, something that is below what he could have gotten on the open market before there's even a franchise tag. You're not even going to make the team, try and do this evil thing that now you, the agent and the player, have to deal with. And they use a franchise tag, so they have this leverage, and they do. The Bengals do have that leverage of the franchise tag. But from an optics perspective, both for the player and the agent who wants to be seen by future potential clients as being able to get them the most money,
yep,
they are highly disincentivized to try to get a deal done sooner than later. Like, they want this to go. The Bengals, on the other hand, still would like this to be done as soon as possible, even if they do have to go the franchise tag route as we're expecting.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Jaire Alexander's career in Green Bay looks all but over.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast.
Jaire Alexander likely on the way out. Rob Demovsky reporting multiple sources inside the organization frustrated with his lack of availability. That's an interesting way to phrase it, isn't it? And when something like that comes out, it's just over. Because coaches generally understand injured players don't play. The only reason you go on the record to a journalist, an ESPN beat reporter, with that sort of complaint is if you believe there are times as an organization when he was healthy enough to play and simply didn't. That is a different kind of level. That is an accusation at that point. It is a suggestion that you are soft, essentially. And once that gets out there, once you tell that to a reporter, it's over. It's over. Here's the exact wording from the report. Multiple team sources have privately expressed their frustration. So now we're talking about, I came to talk to you to complain about Alexander's inability to stay healthy and or play through injuries. And that second piece is the piece. The play through part. It's one thing to get hurt. It's another thing to not want to continue to play while you are hurt. And for this team, for this head coach, that kind of thing will land you in the doghouse. And look, it's not the first time that we've seen, think back to the weeks where he was practicing and then he wasn't, and he was full go and then he was not. And Matt LaFleur, you could tell the guy has no poker face, him and Mark Murphy. He was annoyed at the whole thing. Very clearly annoyed. And maybe it was as simple as he was annoyed that at the circumstances. Man, we just can't catch a break with this Jaire Alexander thing. I told you at the time on this show, I didn't think that was it. And I thought that it was weird the way that it was all being handled. Both by, the medical staff, the way that Matt LaFleur was choosing to handle it in press conferences. It was all weird. It smelled. This was smoke. And then, you hear things about what's going on behind the scenes, things that people believe, things that people are feeling about the situation. It echoes what was reported in ESPN. We talked about it on this show. And there was a whole cohort of people who, there is this push now. We have to defend the players at all costs. So a player who's not playing, the pendulum has swung too far. And part of that is because there are jackasses out there that are saying, oh, so-and-so got paid and therefore they don't want to play anymore because they got their money. They don't have to be out there. I think generally that is nonsense. And players go after, guys for not hitting their parlays or not coming through for them in fantasy football. And so there is a level of jackassery that we have to push back against, just like as a football culture. But it has swung too far. Because there was a cohort of people going, he's hurt. What do you want him to do? He's hurt. And I'm like, are you watching the same thing I'm watching? Are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing? Are you watching the head coach clearly frustrated? Like, this is not the first time this sort of thing has happened. It's just not. And go back and remember the weirdness around David Bakhtiari. And Matt LaFleur, oh yeah, he's going to be good to go, and then he's not. And then, yeah, we think he's going to practice. Oh no, he's not. And the frustration you could see build from Matt LaFleur. Now, he ends up playing eventually. He played that 2022 season. He was going to start in 2023. And then got hurt again. And unfortunately, it looks like his career is over. But that was weird. And Matt LaFleur made it obvious. I wouldn't say made it known, but made it obvious. He thought it was weird too. We don't always have to be like, well, they're hurt. Yes, clearly they're hurt, but is there more to the story? What the team believes matters here too. Does the team believe that they can play? Now, look, your mileage may vary on that. The team has a different incentive structure than the player. So I don't even want to quite go down that path. But this is a situation that's more than just he can't stay healthy. It is not only can he not stay healthy, we think there are times when he was 80, 85, 90%, where we would expect someone making the amount of money that he's making, who is as good as he is, who is as important to this team as he is, to make a better effort to be out there. That is clearly the subtext of this report. And that is my understanding, at least, and not from everybody, but there are important stakeholders in that building who certainly feel that way. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, how about you combine those live bets into a same-game parlay? I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps me in the moment. Every exciting bounce of the ball, every late game rally, every clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you get paid, and when you win, you get paid instantly. You get paid. You get paid. As we draw closer to the NCAA tournament, now's a great time to take a look at the Final Four odds. Auburn and Duke lead the way, -150 and -115. My goodness. Maybe a more intriguing play. The Terrapins of Maryland at 10-1. Analytics love the Terps, as well as the Kentucky Wildcats, who sit at 8-1 to make the Final Four. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast.
We are talking defensive tackles today on the podcast, reflecting on the 2024 season and discussing what needs to happen here this offseason to improve this group. And we've talked about some position groups to this point where you felt like maybe the Bills kind of had what they need already on the roster. With defensive tackle, this is definitely a position group where you feel like there's some outside additions that need to happen this offseason. So we'll break it all down for you right now. Let's start by talking about the signature name for this group, and that's Ed Oliver, a 2019 first-round pick number 9 overall. He's 27 years old, turns 28 in December, entering the second season of his 4-year, $68 million contract extension. And the Bills, in their efforts to create cap space this offseason, they can do a restructure or a conversion with Ed Oliver's deal, and that would free up $10.4 million in cap space. So I think that's something you can expect to see happen. 2024, Ed Oliver played in 14 games, 14 starts, was on the field for 66% of snaps, collected 29 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and 39 pressures. His 2024 review is basically that he didn't come close to matching the impact or the production of what he did in 2023. Just look at these numbers. Tackles in 2023, 51, down to 29. Tackles for loss, 14, down to 5. Sacks, 9.5, down to 3. 9.5 down to 3. Run stuffs, 32, down to 15. I mean, just didn't come close. Now, he turned it on later in the year. I think that Detroit game forward was a good stretch for Ed Oliver. It reminded me of the player we watched in 2023, but there was a bunch of games before that where he was really quiet, and the Bills needed that impact, and he wasn't delivering it. And the Bills need him to be more consistently impactful. And you felt like in 2023 that contract extension that he signed at $17 million a season was looking like a bargain deal for the Bills. I don't think you have the same warm fuzzies about it today as you did during the season. Now, I'd say that $17 million a season, that's 16th in terms of the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL. I think that's probably a pretty reasonable place for Ed Oliver to be. But again, it doesn't really feel like the same bargain as it did while you're watching him really have his best season in 2023. So as for the 2025 outlook, he's got to be consistently impactful. I want to continuously see 2023 Ed Oliver and late 2024 Ed Oliver all the time. And so you don't want to have to talk about like an established player like this, age 27 season coming up here, paid, right? Top 10 pick. You don't want to have consistency conversations. But that's where we're at because of the decline in production year over year from Ed Oliver. And so when I'm thinking of areas that this team can be better in 2025, it's Ed Oliver playing to the standard that he's showed us he is capable of. Daquan Jones, 2022 free agent signing, 33 years old. He turns 34 in December. Entering the second year of that 2-year, $16 million contract he signed last offseason. Perhaps you're interested in how the Bills can get out of that deal. There's not a great opportunity to do it unless it's a post-June 1st release where you would then save $5.5 million in cap for 2025. But you do accumulate $4 million in 2025 dead cap and $3.7 million in 2026 dead cap. You're probably best just keeping Daquan Jones. And I think at a minimum, Daquan Jones can be a reasonable rotational piece as your, as far as your nose tackle one technique position, just because there's really no cap saving opportunity here. And then you don't really want to just push out dead cap multiple years because you want to get like $1.5 million. Doesn't make much sense to me. In 2024, Daquan Jones, 16 games, 16 starts, one of only 2 defensive starters that didn't miss a game due to injury, him and Greg Rousseau. Jones played 53% of the defensive snaps, 23 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 24 pressures. As for his 2024 review, I thought he was just okay. I was certainly hoping for a lot more impact. And when you consider that 2023 the 2023 season into 2024, the whole idea was you had to do a roster reset. You had to get younger. You had to get cheaper. And the one exception that you made to that philosophy was extending Daquan Jones. And he was on a heater in 2023. before that pec injury, had a strong campaign in 2022 and didn't really build on that. And maybe that's to be expected at age 33, coming off of a year where he missed a bunch of time due to a pectoral injury. But the Bills kind of went against the grain with their their off-season philosophies. And, maybe there's some buyer's remorse for extending Daquan Jones. And so in 2025, maybe there's a chance the Bills move on, but they don't have to if he is back, which I kind of expect him to be. Just be a stable player at one tech that probably helps groom the successor. And so you just didn't get enough from these starters. And obviously, I think the whole defense had its issues, whether it was adjusting to some new coaching, whether that's the coordinator or even some position groups. You had injuries early in the season with Milano, then Taron Johnson, then Terrell Bernard, injuries throughout the entire year. Just a lot of adjusting defensively. And you look at this defensive tackle group and just don't feel like you got what you needed out of them.